political conditions of the world and local community. For those of you joining us for the first time, Signs of the Times program that airs live every Monday night here on Channel 12 at 8 o'clock, and it reruns every Tuesday at 4. So if you miss us on Monday, you can catch us on Tuesdays at 4. Tonight's program, every so often what we do is bring our elder Yaakov Ben Israel into the program to do a recap of the previous programs that we've recorded over the past 3 weeks, just to do a recap to give us some insight from his perspective, from an elderly perspective, if you will, to bring us up to date as to the issues happening around the world. So without further ado, one thing I want to mention before we go to the elder, we have a couple of features that we've added to the program for those of you joining us for the first time. We have our Around the World report as well as our bi-monthly commentary. So we've added these two features so that we can continue to bring you quality programming here on Signs of the Times. So without further ado, we're going to go to our Around the World report, which is featuring one of our panelists, Mr. David Geist. David?
Signs of the Times Around the World report. Over the weekend, revelers danced and drank and dyed the rivers green in honor of St. Patrick's Day. These pathetic and misguided traditions serve well to illustrate how the uninformed masses so often celebrate and practice customs without the slightest thought of the origins, the implications, or the results of their behavior. The tricolor flag of Ireland is green, white, and orange. The green represents Catholicism brought to the island by St. Patrick. The orange represents Protestantism injected into Ireland forcibly by Henry VIII, Mary I, Elizabeth I, and Oliver Cromwell by settlement for political purposes. The white represents unity, which has never graced the shores of this downtrodden nation. Notice people do not wear white on an Irish Heritage Day, but rather wear green on St. Patrick's Day. Perhaps it is love for the underdog which unites the hearts of foreigners with the historically oppressed Catholics. One biting irony in the whole situation is that the Protestant church in that region was founded by Henry VIII of England just so he could get a divorce. His children, Mary and Elizabeth, remained Protestant, but tailored the doctrine and liturgy to closely resemble Catholicism so as not to offend Catholics in England. This was all done in the name of politics and uniting the empire, and had nothing whatsoever to do with the genuine religious convictions of these rulers. To the people of Ireland, however, especially after the oppressive regime of Oliver Cromwell, Protestantism began to be identified with the English domination and repression, and Catholicism with home rule. These Catholics who desired an Irish republic became known as Republicans. Politically, their organization was founded by Arthur Griffith in 1905 and was named Sinn Féin, which means we ourselves in Gaelic. A secret organization which fought for the same goals became known as the IRB, the Irish Republican Brotherhood. So were the people fighting for religious zeal or Irish nationalism? As you can see, the two have become melded together in a sad and misplaced attempt to liberate a people from themselves and to extricate Irish citizens from centuries of monarchs and dictators who used religion merely as a means to a political end. The current leader of Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams, was applauded in a parade in Peckville, Pennsylvania, despite the fresh smell of smoke still hovering over London from recent IRA bombings. Moreover, Adams offered no more than esoteric political doublespeak full of hints and innuendo, but otherwise devoid of content. It's a hard life wherever you go, but if we poison our children with mindless traditions, poison ourselves with green beer, and even poison our rivers with green dye, we perpetuate hatred and bloodshed in a very unlucky island halfway around the world. In other prophetic news, political doublespeak and innuendo also abounded in statements made by the Chinese government threatening any ships who should enter the Taiwan Strait. It seems how the United States is the only country who is moving warships toward the Taiwan Strait. I think we can infer that this was a direct warning from the Chinese government. Also in Taipei, Chinese citizens burned American flags and an effigy of an American battlecruiser. Russia's Duma voted overwhelmingly Friday for a communist resolution calling the 1991 breakup of the Soviet Union illegal. The stage is being set for a very interesting election in June, especially since the so-called breakaway republics are fiercely independent. In fact, the Chechen leader said this week that he would not negotiate with Boris Yeltsin, whom he considers untrustworthy. The unrest and bitterness continues in Bosnia as time brings to light more fissures in the Dayton Peace Accords. As NATO troops finally arrested a few suspected arsonists and looters, most of the suburbs from which Serbs were removed under the Dayton Agreement lay in ashes, torched as the Serbs were leaving. This is hardly a sign that these people embrace the structure of this so-called peace agreement. Also, Muslims blocked a road in southern Bosnia, further straining relations with the Croats. Nevada farmers vow to continue to fight despite a court ruling that the federal government does indeed own over 80% of Nevada grazing land and has the right to regulate its usage. The farmers are dependent on the land for grazing and are being denied access by federal wildlife managers for mainly environmental concerns. These farmers are very serious, and there are rumors that conflict may ensue when federal agents try to enforce the legislation. Whatever the outcome of higher appeals, we haven't heard the last of the sagebrush rebellion. And finally tonight, a super pest called the brown citrus aphid has now made its way to Florida from Cuba. The aphid is immune from pesticides and is basically unstoppable. Well, those are the signs of the times around the world. Daniel, back to you.
Thank you, Dave. Like I mentioned earlier, on tonight's program, every so often what we'd like to do is bring the elder priests of the New Covenant Congregation of Israel, Yaakov ben Israel, into our studios to do a recap of our previous 3 programs. So this is an opportunity for you, the viewers, to ask the elder questions regarding our topic specifically. But also, if there's a question that's somewhat related to our topic that you'd like to inquire of the elder, we'll give you the opportunity to ask your question. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce the guest for tonight, the elder priest of the New Covenant Congregation of Israel, Yaakov ben Israel.
Shalom.
Shalom, elder.
Shalom, my brother.
Elder, over the last 3 shows, we've talked about several things. One of the topics we dealt with was coping with the curses.
Mm-hmm.
The other topic was technology to the next millennium. And last week we talked about a real hot topic also, which was international affairs, how they relate to the children of Israel. Let's begin with coping with the curses. First of all, let's back up. Let's start at the end, because I think the international affairs is very important right about now, because just last week we was discussing about the bombings taking place in the land of peace, if you will. I mean, buses blowing up and so forth. There's, and even in David's report, he was mentioning some of the things taking place in Ireland and so forth, the violence in those areas. But how does the international affairs around the world, especially like over in the land of peace, why should we watch these events? Is it important for us to watch?
Well, of course, it's world news, and we live in a global community today, and the things that affect the other nations are eventually going to affect Israel as a whole, simply because of those curses that God has put on it. As quiet as it's kept, when we study the scripture, we find out that, especially in Psalms 2 and Revelations 12, we find out that the kings of the earth and all the rulers have set themselves in array against us. This is why we never can get any good, solid organization going that we control that's basically for the betterment of the children of Israel. We always have to have outside influence in order for these things to work. Just same thing with the Civil Rights Movement. For example, when the Civil Rights Movement came through, it really didn't get a whole lot of steam until the Gentiles got behind it. And then the so-called Jews, the Edomites, started pouring a lot money into it and backing things up with the American Civil Liberties Union. So naturally, we can very well see that these are the same people that had a hand in busting up those groups. So when we talk about the things that's going on in other nations today, what we have to do is look and see that we're on the bottom of the pile. everything trickles down, and we have to wait for that trickle-down effect to come through to see how is it going to affect us, so we'll know which one of the curses is being made manifest and which prophet that we can go to and read these things and understand why these things take place.
Speaking of the curses, like I said, we did a show coping with the curses. What are the curses that we're coping with? I mean, because some of them was brought out on the last program, and one that was, in particular you just kind of alluded to was us being made the tail instead of the head and so forth. But would you elaborate?
Yeah, well, in Deuteronomy 28 chapter, when it tells us the exact things that was going to happen to us, and when you add Isaiah 6 chapter, God told us that all the nation was on the earth was going to get high above us, and we was going to become the tail, and that we would borrow from them. Right, and we wouldn't lend to them, and he told us that our family structures would be destroyed, and we was going to pine, and we was going to do a lot of work but get very little pay for it, and that we was going to pine away in our unrighteousness, and while we were in our enemy's land serving gods of wood and stone, and we wouldn't have any king, any prince, any culture, anything of our own. And when you look right at us as a nation of people, brother, all of the other nations have a culture, except us. And the borrowing power that we have, well, the monies that we borrow to buy things, we basically get this from the Gentiles and from other nations, because we don't have too many banks set up. And the ones that are set up in our neighborhood, they're basically controlled by the Gentiles.
You know, one thing that was mentioned too, brought out on the program we talked about coping with the curses, was that these curses would serve in conjunction with the blessings had the children of Israel obeyed God's law. But they was to serve as a sign upon God's people.
Right, so everybody would know who we are. See, that's why they were a sign upon them. But today, people don't pay the signs any attention. See, seeing that we become democratized and Christianized, we don't look for the signs anymore. Like the Lord said, the Messiah said, watch as well as pray. And he said, when you see all these things begin, it's St. Matthew 24 chapter, he said, when you see all these things begin to come upon the earth, he said, look up, because your redemption is nigh. And he told us, say, watch as well as pray. So what we do is, by us not knowing who we are as a nation of people, and by us being fed, hand-fed, spoon-fed, rather, so-called social studies, in our school, we were raised up not to pay any attention to world affairs as a nation, because we weren't considered a nation, and a lot of us just didn't see how things in Japan could affect us today. So basically, the God of Israel put these things on us so that we would, so that other nations would know who we are, and that would give us a little, maybe a little slack if the nations knew. But what happened was the nations forgot themselves. And once that's because we didn't practice our culture. The nations forgot themselves. Then once the nations forgot, then we weren't called Hebrew Israelites anymore. We were called by proverbs and bywords and whatsoever the Christian Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, these good Christian folks in the South that had us, our forefathers as slaves, decided to call us.
Well, you know, speaking of the curses and us having to cope with those curses, when you think about a curse, when you think about something that's been pronounced upon the people that will actually, I mean, in time it would make itself manifest, and everybody would know, and you spoke of that being those being signs. But just how are we to, I mean, is there any way we can come from under those curses, if anything? Or are they to continue on until a particular point in time, or?
Well, Paul gave a good answer to that. Paul said blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles become in. But in order to understand that, you have to go back into the 2nd chapter of Daniel and the 7th chapter of Daniel, and read the length of time that was given this last system of things to the Gentiles to rule upon this earth. And once you get all that figured out, you can very well see that the things that were said pertaining to these curses would last until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now, that really won't take place. I mean, as far as our people in mass is concerned, there's always been a remnant that knew the truth. This is how it was passed down from generation to generation. But as far as our people in mass is concerned, the prophet Isaiah said that the Lord said he's going to bring us into the wilderness. And he was going to speak to us comfortably and then bring us under the bonds of that covenant. And that's when the curses will be ceased, when the eyes of the blind will be opened and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped so they can see and hear what's going on. You know? And because this is a thing from God. There hasn't been you check back as far as you want to in history, none of these things has happened to any other nation except us.
And see, I was going to ask you, why is that?
Well, that's because these are the things that God put on us. And if they happen to other nations, then we as a people wouldn't be able to prove who we are.
Okay.
You see, but these are the things, the curses that's upon our people is what kind of helps us to prove our relationship with God and why we're in the condition that we're in now. You know, I used to ask people when I talk with them, ask them, do they believe God love you? And the average brother or sister say, well, yeah, I believe God loves me. I ask him, I say, well, why did he bring your forefathers over here as servants?
Right.
And they don't know the answer. Or either some of them say, because we disobeyed him. I say, show me where we disobeyed him. And no one knows.
Right.
No one knows simply because of that curse of blindness that the Lord has put on. And like he said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. But seeing that you resist knowledge, then I'm going to resist you. So what we have a tendency to do is look for knowledge so-called instead of reading the legacy and obtaining the knowledge that our forefathers left. See, our forefathers were the one that wrote the Bible. And if you notice, all of the nations has tried to exclude us from that royalty and from that priesthood because our fathers was raised, the only thing they know is we was raised up over here slaves.
Right, right.
So naturally, the nations has a built-in, they don't want to admit it, but there's a built-in hatred against the children of Israel simply because it's not man that's actually doing this, because it's not flesh and blood that we wrestle with. It's powers and principalities and spiritual wickedness in exceedingly high places. And Satan is trying to destroy us as a nation of people. If he can't do it himself, but what he does is he gets the nations to do it. And when you look around, brother, we grabbed onto every train of religion that come through.
Right.
Every one. This is part of that destruction.
That's part of one of those curses, too, being given up to worshiping gods of wood and stone.
Wood and stone day and night, where God say, I'm not going to I'll show you any favor.
Well, you know, would you say then that you mentioned earlier about the lack of knowledge. You know, some people would have tried to equate the curses that fell upon, that was pronounced against the children of Israel, as the curse, not the curse pronounced upon the children of Israel, but the curse pronounced upon Canaan. They tried to equate that with, you know, the so-called Negro here in America, saying that they was cursed black and so on and so forth.
Lack of knowledge. Ham was already black. So if he cursed Canaan, his grandson, he wouldn't have been cursing him black because the seed was already black, you see. They come from lack of knowledge. When you read, the curse on Canaan was that a servant of servants would he be. And when our people came out of Egypt, out of bondage in Egypt under the Ethiopians, when we came out of bondage in Egypt and went into our land at the Battle of Jericho, if you read the history in the Bible, you find out that all of the kings of Canaan, the sons of Canaan, was there. So they went into captivity under Joshua, who had took Moses' place. So that curse fell then, and he did become a servant of servants. It didn't say he was cursed in black. Right. He was a servant of servants, that's all.
Look, Elder, we got a phone call. This is an opportunity we're giving to our viewers to ask you to inquire of your knowledge regarding the particular issues that we're dealing with tonight, coping with the curses, technology in the millennium, and as well as international affairs. So we're going to go to a call. Caller, go ahead. State your name, please. Okay, I guess we lost that call. One thing, Elder, you mentioned a couple of times, I just want for clarity for our new viewers, you mentioned the word Gentiles. Who are the Gentiles?
White folks. It's plain as it's kept. They're Europeans. Now, here's something that's quite interesting. You can find that out in Genesis 10. One of Noah's son called a Gentile. It was Japhet, and he inherited all of Europe and Asia. He's a European. But here's something that people don't pay attention to. You know, just because they told us that they brought some blacks from Africa, we assumed that we were Africans.
Right.
Yet, the Israelis, the so-called Jews in the land today, they're white, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we call white folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not of Japhet's seed. They're Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
Assad of Syria is Semitic. The Ayatollah Khomeini, he was Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, he was a Gentile, and Assad of Syria was Gentile, but they were ruling over Semitic people. But the Israelis, why don't they call the Israelis white folks? They don't call them that. They call them Jews.
Mm.
You see? But yet and still what this shows is that just like they have different nations, different seeds, that's the same color of the Gentiles, they have different seeds that's the same color of the Hamites. As a matter of fact, back when you read the Bible narrative, you find out that each time God brought a nation of people in upon the nation of Israel, a lot of our people went down in Egypt and hid themselves.
Right. Moses.
Right. They thought Paul was an Egyptian in the New Testament, you see. But people don't get off into those things simply because we're not basically concerned. We love everybody. And we're not basically concerned with that because we say, oh, you know, God, there's no respect of persons with God and so forth and so on. But there is a respect of persons with God. And to show you that there's a respect of person with God, the other nations aren't keeping God's law, are they? Well, he's not putting them in captivity, is he? So he put us in captivity because we were his chosen people. And this is his way of chastening us until the time of reformation of all things. And then, like the book of Revelation said, he that leadeth in captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword shall be killed with the sword. So what Satan did was when Satan found out he was cast out of heaven and he didn't have access into heaven anymore, he went to make war with the remnant of the woman's seed that brought forth that man-child that was going to rule all nations. That's the house of Israel. And truly, we can see by our state, our current estate today, that someone is making war against us, brother.
Let's take this thing to another level here. We're talking about technology, and you talked about making war with the saints. Of course, we know that the technology is in place today to bring about some of those things that we've talked about previously on this program, bring in usher in the New World Order and some of the new tracking, security type devices. And we also mentioned that during the Olympics, there's going to be a display of all of these new inventions, so to speak. But also it brings in a very important issue, I think. We've been much talk about this mark. The mark of the system or of the beast, if you will. Can you speak? Well, before I ask you to speak to that, let's go to this caller, bring this caller in. Caller, go ahead, state your name, please.
My name's Everett.
Okay.
I spoke to Waco like 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you remember me or not. We was talking about like being an Israelite. Like I was asking you a question: how do I tell someone that that they're from the tribe of Israel and who they are? Because I always tell me that they're not. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Thank you, caller. That's Brother Everett, and he's asking the question, how can he convey to people that he is an Israelite or that he is of the house of Israel?
Well, just say it, but the thing of it is this. You have to show yourself worthy of these things, and the only way that you can do that is through studying. Now, what needs to happen is someone needs to go in the scripture and do what they don't do in the churches. Get a world map, show who everybody is, all the seeds that are upon the earth, and then you can prove very well who you are by your present situation and circumstance. It's only 3 nations of people that's really out of their land. That's the Israelis and the Palestinians and us. And the Israelis are in our land saying that they're the Jews. The Palestinians are in our land saying that they're the house of Israel. Israel is called Palestine, you see. And those are Abraham's nephew Lot's two boys, Moab and Ammon. Here we are over here. We're claiming to be African Americans. Okay, so but we are the only three nations of people that are out of the land. And the best way to prove that to a person is my favorite way of doing it is through our history, right here in this country here. Our history goes beyond what the people that we see on the boards in the school every year. You see, our history is written in the scripture. When you go back and check that history, you can very well see that we were sold down into Egypt, and from Egypt we were sold into the Americas. But the Africans didn't sell their own people. See, they sold the Hebrew Israelites. People don't sell their own folks. They usually sell strangers. And we were sold and brought over here to this country here. But our history, when they finally did allow us to get off into churches, you have to look at the significance of the names of our churches. Ebenezer, Mount Moriah, Big Bethel, Mount Sinai, Mount Zion, New Jerusalem. All those were places that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel built altars to God. The songs that we sang, the songs of deliverance that we sang, those old Negro spirituals that our fathers used to sing, didn't nobody teach us that. See, the nations didn't teach us that because they didn't want us to know how to read and write.
Nor did they sing them.
Right. Now, it just seemed too much of a coincidence that we know that the Bible tells you that the Hebrew Israelites were black and that they're in captivity. Right? It just seemed too much of a coincidence that we are here in this country here, black people, and all of our old churches were named after sacred places that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob built altars to God. And then we came along and sang those Negro spirituals, and they were songs of deliverance, and it was all about what the prophets say was going to happen to the children of Israel. And we know that the Gentiles, brother, in some places, if you got caught with a book, you might have got hung for it because they didn't want us to know how to read and write this language. So we have to ask ourselves, where did we get all of that history from? There's not one African song that we can say that we sang, or one name that we can say that we named our children after any place or anyone in Africa until we got off into that Pan-Africanism in the 60s.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead. State your name, please.
Yes, my name is Raymond Graves.
Can you bring that caller up?
Yes, hello?
Okay, go ahead, call. State your
Okay,
name.
my name is Raymond Graves, and what I'm basically doing is I'm just trying to make a point. Regardless whether, the people are black or white, it doesn't really make a difference. What I feel that we should start doing as a whole people, we should start coming together, because regardless whether Jesus Christ, God, whoever you may want to call it, but I believe in God, okay? No matter what color God was, God didn't say that he was coming to save one particular person. When God comes, regardless what color he is, he's coming to save us all as a whole, all those who believe and serve him to the best of their ability. So what I feel myself, right, my point is, something that we have no control over is not worth dwelling on. What we should do today now is dwell and try to make a difference in things we do have control over.
Okay, thank you, caller.
Okay, thank you.
Elder, he brings some issues to the table. He said it shouldn't matter.
Well, then if it doesn't matter, why was all the covenants made with the house of Israel? Why wasn't the covenants made with the other people? See, that come from lack of knowledge, my brother. That's lack of understanding. See, we understand that God is going to save all of his creation. We understand that, but see, there's going to be an order of things that's going to set up. See, the Lord is coming here to set up a dictatorship, a governmental system. And all of the ruling power of this dictatorship has been given to the children of Israel by covenants. Just like the prophet, you can read the last 6 chapters of the prophet Isaiah, and Isaiah lays it out plain for you. The scripture tells you, say, they're going to take them captives whose captives they were, and they're going to rule over their oppressors. Now, we know that the people here in this country here that had us as captives, regardless to we know it was the Gentiles, so we can very well say that who we're dealing with now is the children of those people that brought us over here as captive. And God say, I visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. You see, so what happens is this. We can believe what we want to, but there is a respecter of persons with God, because if it wasn't, then covenants would have been made with God, would have made covenants with people outside of the nation of Israel. And like Paul says, see, the doctrine that we received in the Christian church about everybody being switched off and all that other stuff and being changed and so forth at the same time, that comes from lack of knowledge. The scripture says, glory and honor to the Jew first. So, in tribulation and anguish to the Jew first. We're the nation that went into captivity first. We're the nation that has to be saved. We're the nation that's on the bottom that has to go to the top, because the covenants was made with our fathers. Christ was a Hebrew Israelite. God had the ability to make him come from any nation of people that he wanted him to come from, right? He's God. Right. But he chose the seed of Israel for that seed to come through. Now, so it did make a difference then, didn't it? Because if it wouldn't have made a difference, then maybe he'd have got a Messiah from the Gentiles, then he'd have had to raise up another one from Ham, then another one from Shem, you see? And he didn't. He raised them up out of one seed. This is why Paul said, and it was said to Isaac, to Abraham about that. He said, in Isaac shall the seed be called. Well, Isaac's son was Jacob. And God made the covenants. This is what people get away from, see. People go about their personal feelings. Right. Your personal feelings will get you killed. You see, what you have to do is get in there and read what was actually said. I mean, don't just go into one part of the book and read one part of the book. Read the whole book. Compare one book with the other one. You find out it's just one book. You know, a lot of churches are not telling people to do that. I remember once church instructing his parishioners to read, when he first started reading the Bible, read from Matthew to Revelations, and the Spirit will bring you Genesis through Malachi. Let's go back to the phone.
Oh, really?
Caller, go ahead.
That's for me.
Yes, go ahead. State your name, please.
Israel.
Okay.
The young man that just called in asking how could he prove that he is the Israelite. All he has to do is go by the words of Jesus in Revelation 2:9, where Jesus explained that those people that are calling themselves Jews are nothing but, they are Gentile. That's the same what happened to them in Germany, because they went in Germany with a false identification. And they're doing the same thing in Palestine, trying to pretend. And remember in Luke 21:24, it tells you that Jerusalem will be trodden down of the Gentiles. So those are not Jews.
Okay.
Those are Gentiles, and they go in other people's lands trying to steal it, claim to be Jews.
Thank you, caller.
All right, thank you.
Well, I think that the period of time that he's talking about is that 3.5 years of great tribulation period that Jerusalem is going to be trodden down by the Gentiles until the fullness of the be trodden down by the Gentiles until the fullness of the Gentiles come in, until they finally set up a man over there and worship him as God. But as far as the Israelis is concerned, I have to beg to differ that the Israelis, the Gentiles, the Israelis are Semitic. That's Jacob's brother Esau. Those were the Herodians that was in Palestine during the time that the Messiah was here. And after Jerusalem fell in 70 A.D., those were the ones that migrated up into Europe, see. And now what Esau has called, and from that time, what Esau has called himself doing is this: taking his blessing back from Jacob. This is why the book of Obadiah asks you, say, how are the things of Esau, not the Gentiles, how the things of Esau searched out. It says he sets his nest among the stars. And he set his nest among the stars of the woman in Revelations 12 and verse 1, that was clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet and the crown of 12 stars upon her head. See, that brother got up off his blessing, and what he's called himself doing is getting his blessing back now. When you want to prove, if a brother want to prove who he is, all he has to do is read the history of the Falasha.
Mm-hmm.
They like to call them, to put another name on them, just like they call us Afro-Americans. They like to call them Ethiopian Jews. They're not Ethiopian Jews, they're Hebrew Israelites, you see. All he needs to do is compare their history in Africa for the past 1,600 years, well, it is 1,900 years now. For the past 1,900 years, compare their history with the history of the Israelis, and they can very well see there's no way that the people in Israel even fit the history that the Falasha. As a matter of fact, when they first start if they were not Israelites, if they were Africans, when they airlifted them out of Ethiopia, they was already in Africa, weren't they? Why did they have to put them in Israel instead of someplace that's in Africa? They got the space for it.
Right.
You see, so.
Right. Well, Elder, with that, we're going to go to our commentary, our bi-monthly commentary.
Okay.
But I want to ask you when we come back, it seems to me, I think it's hard for us to imagine ourselves being kings and priests, if you will, in the earth. I think it's hard for us to imagine ourselves being a viable part of the global community. But with that, we're going to
be in the lineage of kings and queens.
Right.
Yeah, we slaves. Yeah, okay.
With that, we're going to go to our Bible commentary. David, take it away.
Good evening. Professional sports have long been an institution in the structure of American society. But in recent years, the leaders of the institutions of Major League Baseball, the National Football League, and the National Basketball Association will need to be institutionalized. In fact, they are all but driving the people crazy. With the baseball strikes, football team relocations, and NBA salary explosions, the average fan is becoming fanatical. The latest episode in the demise of the professional sports is a clash between individual beliefs and the mandate of the NBA. A player on the Denver Nuggets, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, has been expressing his displeasure with the American tradition of the national anthem. Mr. Abdul-Rauf decided that, due to his own convictions, he no longer wished to participate in the anthem, refusing to stand and, in some cases, not entering the arena until after the anthem. When this practice became public, it set off a resounding sound wave of foul as the executive board of the NBA decided to suspend the player until his actions changed. The media and fans squawked in unison as they sang their displeasure to Abdul-Rauf's dissing. The situation was quickly settled after Abdul-Rauf changed his position and saved his $32,000 plus per game salary. But there's a deeper issue here, and that is America's Pandora box has been opened. Abdul-Rauf now stands, hands raised, praying to his God. It is only a matter of time before he is joined by other religious sects in protest. They, in turn, will draw allies with the good old boys who don't know the words to the anthem, the teenagers who could care less about the anthem, and the diehard sports fans who generally are inebriated by the anthem to raise their vision above the cheerleaders' pom-poms. For here lies America's Pandora's box. The paradox is that the country that has formed as a reaction against the Roman Catholic Church and based on religious freedom now has to put up with all religions of man. The NBA was let off the hook in a way because they did not have to fight the battle between religious expression and blind obedience. However, they are now forced with the battle between religious tolerance and close quarters. How fierce can this battle be? Check Ireland. Check Bosnia. Check Israel. The prophet spoke of a latter-day Babylon, a strong land that would one day come tumbling down, much like the fall of Rome. America has tried its best not to be that Babylon, but as the year 2000 approaches, the pillars of the American infrastructure continue to be rocked by Samson-like foes. One thing is clear: America is confused, America is angry, America is unstable, and America's instability is a symptom of the instability of the world. There are wars and rumors of wars, and prophecy after prophecy have come true. The Most High God has decreed that he will redeem his people from captivity, and the 1,000-year reign of revelations will come to pass. So as we look at the handwriting on the wall, we have to ask ourselves, are these things that happen just unrelated, insignificant things that are happening, or are they all related to the scriptures and to the teachings of the Most High God?
Hi, welcome back to Signs of the Times. Tonight we're talking about, we're discussing with the elder doing a recap of the last 3 shows that we've done here. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a live program. You can give us a call at 404-377-9057 to interact with the elder. Elder, right before we went to the break, well, first of all, I understand that we have a call. Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead and state your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Ishmael Muhammad. I would like to address the elder.
Sure, go ahead.
This is in regards to, I heard him earlier speak of the blessings and how it would be carried on through the lineage of Isaac.
Okay.
I beg to differ, not so much so out of being someone that want to argue with the elder. I respect his point of view.
Okay.
But in a sense where I find a lot of discrepancy in the literature of the Bible. And the more I research it, I find that the rabbinical scholars did a lot of writing on their own, doing their own interpretations,
okay,
and corrupting the book as far as that blessing being shown that through Isaac. And in the wording of the Bible, I have Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. It says that, take thy son, thy only son. See? And how can Isaac be an only son when Ishmael was 14 years old when he was born?
That's a good question, caller, and that's something, Elder, you've addressed before about the only son thing. So thank you, caller. Go ahead and address this, brother.
That's because God only accepted Isaac as the son. Regards to Ishmael being there, when he told him to take Esau, his only son, that's what we was referring to. Now, see, when you get down into lineages, see, black folks want to deal with it. But when you get down into actual lineages, you can very well see that Ishmael is Muammar Gaddafi's folks.
Mm-hmm.
See, that has nothing to do with us, you see. And these young folks that's in the nation now talking the things that they're talking, brother, I was in the nation back in the 50s, and I know how that thing went, you know. But every time a twin was born, the Arabs now, understand now, the Arabs tell us, say, well, see, this was this other boy, it wasn't him. Now, why should I have to believe the Arabs when the Arabs had us in captivity also?
Mm-hmm.
And we hated them at that time and didn't want to accept nothing they said, so what we did was we believed what the Christians said because the Christians didn't have us in captivity.
Right.
I'm talking about during the 6th century, right?
Right.
Okay, now, when the Christians came over and got us in captivity, then we got mad with the Christians. Now we want to side back with the Arabs because we don't want to believe what's actually written down. Now, I've heard many brothers say it's a discrepancy here, it's a discrepancy here, but they can't prove it. You know why? Our current condition proves who we are, and that the blessings was given to us. When you get into and read the things that God said was going to happen, I'm talking about 4,000 years ago.
Right.
God said was going to happen to our people. These things has only happened to our people. But we don't want to accept that, see. We want to go around and say, well, I joined on to this here because I dislike these white folks. That's all it's about. That's all it's about, see. And the Lord told you, say, love your enemy. Pray for him so the Lord won't kill him. That's why he told you to do that, you know, because we got to understand one thing. God created all flesh, and he had to have a way to deal with flesh. And the way that he chose to do, he had brought the flood upon man. But see, the Muslims say, well, that wasn't a flood. That was really the black man binding the white man hand and foot and marching him across the Sahara Desert into the lower part of Russia. See, that's what we say, right? Well, when did we lose all of this power and all of this technology that we were supposed to have had? You know, I've heard the story that there's a man named Yaqub, an Arab now, okay, named Yaqub, that made a white man from a black man. In other words, we knew all about genetics and everything back, DNA and all that stuff, chromosomes and so forth. We knew about that back then, right? Well, as many of us as it is on the earth today, and that's a lot of us set up over in Africa, right? When did we lose all of that technology?
That would be my question.
Right.
I've asked
and
that
they
question
say, well, the
before.
white man robbed us of our heritage. He didn't rob you from nothing. See, what it was this. We refused to teach our children our heritage because we wanted to assimilate, and that's how we lost it. We never sang. We had to learn how to speak Arabic. Since we've been over here. Any other religion that we practice, we had to learn how to speak those strange languages that those other religions came from, right? But we came out singing and doing our own thing that had to do specifically with what was written down by a black race of people called the Hebrew Israelites. Now, as far as the Bible being tampered with, I can go in Daniel 7 and come 3,000 years later and go in the book of Revelations and show you some things that Daniel and those prophets say was going to be set up in the latter days, and it's set up right now. You see? But they're going to tell me King James did this, that's talk. See, that come from not lack of knowledge. It come from not doing the right research. If you do the right research, they'll find out that King James commissioned 19 priests from among the Hebrew Israelites that were called the Essenes. And they were the ones that translated the Bible from Hebrew to Greek so the Gentiles could understand it, because they had to have salvation also.
You know, I had a brother tell me recently, I was asking him to show me something. He had mentioned something. I said, well, you know, I submit to the truth. Just show it to me. And the brother said, I am the book.
Right. I had a brother tell me, he said, well, look, I haven't got my notes now. I said, show me one discrepancy. I mean, to prove it to me, not just read something and say what that means. Prove it to me.
Right.
Well, I haven't got my notes, but, man, anytime I go in somebody else's book, I find just what I'm interested in, highlight it, underline it. When I go to the person with them, I say, here, this is what I have problems with.
Right.
See.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead. State your name, please.
Yes, my name is Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the elder as far as if they would just read the Bible, Deuteronomy 28, the things that have happened to us as a people. If they read Obadiah, it's real plain to see who Esau is over in the land, claiming to be who he isn't. And basically, you know, many other scriptures, Jeremiah, you know, Ezekiel 38, 39, I mean, you can go on. You know, I just can't see why the brothers would get off into things that would lead them into darkness, you know, and get caught up in a movement, emotional.
Right.
They need to really sit down and read the book. They need to sit down and look at our people and the conditions that we're in, and they'll see very plainly who we are as a people and where we are in time.
Right. Thank you, caller. You know, Elder, I want to mention something. I noticed that I was given one of the calendars that you all put out, and it's calendar titled Countdown to the Millennium 2000. It's a very nice calendar.
Right.
And a lot of the things that you're speaking of even today are, you know, contained in this calendar. But one thing I found very interesting was, you know, how even the beginning of the year and things of that sort are different. And one thing I found interesting, even like the issue of April Fools. And I think Pamela mentioned on the show before, but people that were continuing to worship, to celebrate, if you will, the new year, the coming of the new year, in right around March, April, I think is what she mentioned. They were called April Fools because the Caesars or someone had changed.
They changed it to January. The first to change it to February, which was the Romans purification month.
Right.
And then they March rather. Then they changed it to February, and then they end up with Janus, the two-faced, the god of doors, that look into the past and to the future and so forth. That's what all the gun shooting and the getting drunk and all that other stuff is all about.
Well, you know, for sake of time, I know there are going to be callers that have inquired about, you know, who you are, what you're all about, and so forth. So do you have an address, phone number you can give the people to where they can contact you?
Yes, I attend, the place where we do study at is NCCI 3711 North Decatur Road on...
Okay, I'm understanding. No phone number. Okay.
Okay.
Just where is your place located?
It's on North Decatur Road. It's 3711 North Decatur Road, Clarkston, Georgia.
Okay.
And we used to have seminars on Sunday night at 8, Tuesday at 8. We have a sisters class, sisters only, okay. Thursday night at 8, and we have a regular class on Saturday at 1 p.m.
Okay, okay. And also, if you will, hang around the station a few minutes,
sure.
Just to take some
sure.
calls. One thing I want to ask you about, too, we alluded to it earlier, we was talking about this technology being in place, and what's on the minds of a lot of people nowadays is this new world order.
Right. Cashless society.
Cashless society.
Right.
What does it all mean?
Well, it makes sense.
Make it plain for us. As a matter of fact, that's the theme of the season. That's the theme for this season of shows.
Sense. It makes sense. A cashless society makes sense because if you take the cash out of society, you're going to take 90% of the crime, of the street crime, out of society. But then you only have that 10% that's high-tech enough in order to transfer funds and break into systems and so forth and so on. But this is, I call it demonology. They like to call it technology. I call it demonology because it's geared to give every man on this, and woman and child on this earth a number.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that number is fed into a system in America called UNIVAC.
Okay.
Okay. In Europe, they call it the beast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's designed to keep track of everything that you do.
So it's not as convenient as it appears.
No, it's not. It's designed to keep track of everything that you do. And it's one thing I can, and it's going to seem like it's the best thing to do.
Right.
I mean, coming up with the Olympics, they're going to empty, I think it's Wachovia.
Mm-hmm.
Is going to Wachovia, right? Is going to issue that smart card that they're going to use from the information that I've received, and people are going to get used to that. That's why they started getting those credit cards and things in the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got used to the credit cards. You know, a lot of places will not take orders from you unless you have a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's going to be the same thing that what they're trying to set up. It's a debit and credit system. That's what they're saying. You get paid, it's nothing but numbers. And we can very well see that because too many of the big players,
mm-hmm.
Of the top 5 players on the world scene, too many of those countries are having their currencies counterfeited.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to be able to give account for all the monies that's out. So we can very well see how it's not only is going to help the governmental system, but it's also, they say, well, it's going to help the little man too, because now the little man don't have to worry about getting robbed or so forth and so on. Everything he has will have that one number on it, and if someone kidnap him, all we got to do is activate his number, and we can track him anywhere in the world, and we know where he is instantly. So it seemed like it the best thing to do. But see, when you get in the book of Revelations, it was that system, this last beast, this 10th toe of the statue of Daniel, that was going to cause all, small and great, to receive that name, number, and mark of the beast. And if you get either one of them, the Lord is going to kill you cut and dry.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead. State your name, please. Go ahead, caller.
Oh, my name, Jarvis, and Tyrone, and I want to ask the man with the hat on. Do he know how to speak Arabian?
Okay, thank you.
Do I know how to speak Arabian? No, I just can speak this English. You know, I don't speak in tongues, my sister. The Lord said, with stammering lips and another tongue will I teach this people. And I was raised up in a country that taught English, and I didn't see the necessity of learning how to speak a foreign language because I wouldn't be living in a foreign country, and the people that I associate with didn't come from didn't come immediately from foreign countries. So no, I don't speak Arabian or any other language.
You know, one thing that is interesting, he bring that up because I think he's trying to allude to the issue of Arabic. And one thing about that is that a lot of people say even Moses and some of the other people and Abraham and so forth, they keep saying, well, they spoke Arabic.
Spoke Hebrew. They call Abraham the Hebrew. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all those folks spoke Hebrew.
Right.
As a matter of fact, the Messiah in the New Testament, he spoke Hebrew. You see, and of course, Paul was one of the smarter brothers that had been educated at the temple in Jerusalem, and he spoke
many
in tongues. He
languages.
spoke various languages, but basically the children of Israel spoke a language they called Hebrew. This is why we were referred to as Hebrew Israelites.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, go ahead.
Am I on?
Yeah, go ahead. State your name, please.
Oh, this is Richard.
Okay.
I've read a lot of books, and I've, like the elder say, gained knowledge on a lot of things, and I believe what he say, and I think they're never taken away that the Hebrews are the chosen people. But I'd like him to speak a little bit on the rapture. I know that everything else is going down, but talk about the rapture and tell me his opinion on that.
All right, thank you, caller. And that may be a subject, Elder. I don't know how long and drawn out it is, but being that we're not talking about that in particular tonight, if you can just offer some short comment, and if he want to contact you, he can call you right after the show. We only got 3 minutes.
Well, then what you need to do is get in Revelation 7 chapter and correlate that with Revelation's 14th chapter and go back and read the 2nd chapter of Romans. See, Revelation 7, just after the tribulation period, see, everybody want to get off the earth before everything happens. See, everybody want to get ahead of black folks, you know. Put them people, they like to use the mother funny words, them N words, but put them people on the bottom. We're going to get off this earth before you, right? But Paul said glory and honor to the Jew first. Right. We have to receive it first. Christ came from among our people, and he said, I'm coming to save my people. As a matter of fact, the so-called Negro in this country is going to be the first people to even see any kind of semblance of salvation. Okay. Now, as far as that rapture was concerned, if you read Revelation 14, that 144,000 from the tribes of the children of Israel were the first fruits to God and the Lamb. These were the first ones that was redeemed from the earth, right? Well, what the church tells us today, that pie in the sky stuff, what the church tells us is this: no. We're going to be redeemed before the tribulation period. Well, if you're going to be redeemed before the tribulation, how is it that the children of Israel in Revelation 14 chapter was the first fruits? It don't make sense. You see, so it's just another fallacy of they come out of the Roman Catholic Church, and the protesters picked it up, and they keep changing it. First, it was going to happen after the Great Tribulation period. Now it's going to happen before the tribulation period. But like they talked about meeting the Lord in the air. But the Lord talked about, Zechariah told you that, Zechariah 14 told you that the Lord was going to come back and his feet was going to stand on the Mount of Olivet, the same place he left from. So we have to deal with that. And like I said, I always say, everybody talking about heaven ain't going there, and if you believe you are, all you got to do is come over to 3911 North Decatur Road any day of the week. And, 37, I'm sorry, it's 3711 North Decatur Road, any day of the week, and we can sit down, and if you accept what's written down, then we can tear up your doctrine for you. Show you who you know, if you believe that it's a rapture before the children of Israel and the new covenant was made with the house of Israel, how could that be? That doesn't make sense. So
what's the old saying, putting the cart before the horse?
What it is, putting words in God's mouth. That's what it is, because God told our forefathers exactly what was going on. As a matter of fact, my brother, tonight we're having one of our feasts tonight. We call it the Feast of the New Moon. A lot of brothers don't want to deal with it because they call us moon worshipers, say we worship in the moon. But if they go back and check Numbers 10, verse 1 through verse 10, then go into 1 Samuel 19, and verse 8 through chapter 20 and verse 32.
Got about 30 seconds.
And then go into 1 Chronicles 23 and 2 Chronicles 2. They can find out that David and all the kings and everything kept the new moon because it was an ordinance.
So it's just the beginning of a new month, actually.
That's what it means, the beginning of a new month. So if folks want to come over, we can. We'll be over there tonight for quite some time, and we'll sit down and deal with these things.
With that, Elder, we're going to go ahead and close out the show. Always enjoy you being here. You always leave a lot of people calling us right after the show. So, but hang around with us for about 10
Certainly
minutes.
will. Certainly
All right, thank you, and join us next week, same channel, same time, here at Media One.